Hello class, welcome back. It's great to see you. This unit series is called Types of Sentences. There are 7 lessons in this unit. These 7 lessons, we will be studying the 4 types of sentences: simple, compound, complex, and compound complex. Before I begin the lesson on these sentence types, I want to make sure that you have opened or printed the guided notes page that goes with this lesson. This will help you follow along in the video and keep your brain active. You can find this handy document either on my live worksheet page, in a link in the description below, or if you're in my TS99 class, I attached it to an email that I sent with this week's work. If you look at your screen now, you will see what these guided note pages look like. There's a different note page for each of the 7 lessons. Make sure you look at the title at the top of each of the note pages and make sure it matches the title of the video. Let's go ahead and begin talking about the sentence type for today. This is the 3rd lesson in the series called Types of Sentences. Today we're going to talk about a more complicated sentence type called complex sentences. Because complex sentences are in fact a bit more complex, I have broken down this type of sentence into 4 mini lessons. Make sure you have your guided notes for complex sentences, subordinating conjunctions before you start this video so you can follow along. Let's go ahead and begin talking about complex sentences and subordinating conjunctions. As we begin to unpack complex sentences, there are some terms and ideas that you must understand. As I said, there's going to be 4 lessons just on complex sentences. The first one will explain in detail subordinating conjunctions. This is important because all complex sentences either have subordinating conjunctions or a certain type of pronoun that we'll talk about later. But let's go ahead and look at this type of complex sentences. So a complex sentence is formed when you combine a dependent clause, which is not a complete sentence, with an independent clause, which is a complete sentence. Let's look at the formula for a complex sentence. I think of it as D for dependent plus I for independent. Remember that the dependent clause is not a complete sentence. It's a special kind of fragment. And the independent clause is a complete sentence, or, like what we talked about, a simple sentence. So what is a dependent clause? Remember when we talked about dependent clauses being like children? They can't be by themselves. Another way to look at it is that a dependent clause is a group of words that contain a subject and a verb, but it's still a fragment. It begins with a subordinating conjunction or a relative pronoun, which we're going to talk about in another lesson soon. Let's look at the example I have for you. Even though she owns a puppy. Now that is a dependent clause, and it begins with a subordinating conjunction. It does have a subject and a predicate, but it is not a complete sentence because it begins with that subordinating conjunction. An example we're going to spend more time in later is the next one. Whomever owns more puppies. Whomever is a relative pronoun. When I put a relative pronoun in front of that, then again I have a dependent clause. We'll talk more about those types of pronouns later. Now let's talk more specifically about subordinating conjunctions. On your screen, you see a list of these subordinating conjunctions. I suggest you write these subordinating conjunctions down and memorize them. It will make it much easier for you to form complex sentences if you know what the most common subordinating conjunctions are. Now, to make a dependent clause, you begin the simple sentence, which does have a subject and a predicate, with that subordinating conjunction. You put it in front of the simple sentence. Let's look at an example. Here we have an independent clause, which is a complete sentence. I did a cartwheel. We have a subject, I, and we have a verb or a predicate, did. That is a complete sentence, a simple sentence, an independent clause. But when I add a conjunction to the beginning of the sentence, I change it from a complete independent clause to a dependent clause. Look what I did. I put the word when in front of that simple sentence. When I did a cartwheel. Now it's a dependent clause. It's a fragment. We have the subordinating conjunction when, we have the subject, I, and we have a verb, did. You see how that works? I know some of you are probably wondering, why would anyone want to turn a simple sentence into a fragment? Well, I want you to consider this. Read this paragraph to yourself as I read it out loud and see what you notice. Now remember, this paragraph is grammatically correct, but I want you to see if you notice something as I'm reading it. Anxious, the player stepped up to the plate. He dug his foot into the dirt. He banged his bat upon the plate. At this time, the pitcher took his stance. It was raining. The ball was slippery. The pitcher threw the ball. It hit the player in the leg. He got to take first base. What did you notice? Well, what you might have noticed is that paragraph sounded very choppy. It had too many simple sentences. If we can combine dependent clauses with independent clauses, it kind of makes it fancy and it gives us some sentence variety. Remember, we had talked about choppy sentences and how we want our sentences to be different lengths. A long sentence and then a short one and a short one and a long one. It sounds better in our writing. So even though the first paragraph was correct, it could sound better. I want you to look at the example now of the paragraph. It's the same paragraph, but I've added some conjunctions to kind of adjust the flow. Let's see how much better it sounds now. Anxious, the player stepped onto the plate. He dug his foot into the dirt. As he banged his bat upon the plate, the pitcher took his stance. It was raining, so the ball was slippery. When the pitcher released, it hit the player in the leg. He got to take first base. Do you see how now these sentences are different lengths and they sound like it has more of a flow and not as simple or choppy. So now I'd like you to try it. Here you see 5 sentences. I want you to turn these independent clauses, which are complete sentences, into dependent clauses by adding a subordinating conjunction. Now remember, the subordinating conjunction needs to come before the simple sentence or before the independent clause. Pause your video, complete the activity, and then turn your video back on, and I'll give you some example sentences that I came up with. Go ahead and pause your video now. So here on your screen, you see some examples of sentences that I've created by adding a subordinating conjunction. Of course, your sentences might look different, as long as you added that subordinating conjunction before the simple sentence. Here's what I wrote. Take note and check your own answers. So if you've taken a look at your answers, now I'm going to ask you to do one more thing. Now you're going to take these fragments or dependent clauses and add something to the end to create a complete thought. So again, keep your coordinating conjunction in the beginning and now add something to the end of the sentence to make it a complete thought. Pause your video, add an end to your sentence, then turn the video back on and I'll give you examples of what I did. Go ahead and pause your video now. So here's what I did with my sentences. Remember, your examples might look different. Here's what I did. Because Shelby slept all afternoon, she wasn't tired. While the 2-year-old threw a tantrum, I went for a walk. After Ryan added 3 helpings of mashed potatoes, he felt sick. I will take you to dinner if you will study for the test. I have been sad since my aunt left town. Now I'm sure you notice that in the last 2 sentences, I added something in the beginning of the sentence. It really doesn't matter as long as you have one independent clause and one dependent clause joined by a conjunction. I realize that was a lot of information in this video. Learning a new language takes time and lots of practice. It can even be more difficult when you can't be in a classroom face-to-face with the teacher. Although there's nothing more that I would like than to be able to be in that classroom face-to-face with you, there is an advantage to having these lessons in a video format. You can always pause the video, write notes and questions, and even repeat instructions that you might need to hear again. Also, don't forget that each of these videos in this series have a guided notes page for you to use. As you watch the video, fill out these guided notes. There's also many activities for you to practice what you have learned. These activities are either in your workbook on the live worksheets, or if you're not in my class, you can find links to these activities in the comments section below. So for now, this concludes today's lesson. But before you go, I'd like to ask you to do a few things. If you enjoyed this video, please show me by hitting the like button here. You can also subscribe to my channel, which will notify every time a new video gets posted. If you have friends or family or other people who you think might enjoy this video, why don't you share it with them? And of course, if you'd like to comment, I'd love to hear from you. write a couple examples of some of the sentence types you've learned today. And lastly, please know what a blessing it is for me to share my passion with you. Thank you for allowing me to come on this journey with you to learn English. Goodbye for now. I'll see you very soon.